Hey, yo, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over the best decks from the 2023 calendar year. 2023 was one of the biggest years for competitive Pokemon, and there were so many different decks that saw success. So today, we're going to be doing an overview of the very best decks that performed this year, and exactly what I think are the top 10 decks of the 2023 year. This list was quite difficult to make because there's so many decks that could have been on this list, but I had to whittle it down to 10. So if you think there are any decks that I missed, make sure to put those in the comments. I'll try to give my justification as to why, some decks are on here and some decks aren't. So anyways, with that being said, if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. We're going to be starting at number 10, and then we're going to go all the way up to number 1. We're going to be talking about why these decks are in the place they are, some of the success that they had, some of the big tournament wins, and notable players that decided to pilot them to great finishes. So with that being said, let's hop into it, starting with number 10. Alrighty, coming at number 10 here, we have Pia Vstar. Now, Pia Vstar can mean a couple of different decks. Pia Vstar paired up with Ice Rider that has most recently been seen success. Pia Vstar paired up with B-Barrel that saw success in the middle of the year. And this is going to be the list that I'm going to be showing off, which is the Palkia Inteleon with Articuno deck that saw quite a bit of success at the beginning of this season. Palkia in general is one of the most underrated cards in the standard format. It doesn't necessarily see a whole lot of play, but when it sees play specifically by top players, it typically does very, very well. It has that subspace will attack, which is able to two-shot most things in the format, along with Star Portal, which gives this deck lots of versatility, allowing you to attack with multiple different water Pokemon. This is going to be the list that Piper Lepine used to get top 8 at the Knoxville Regional Championships earlier this year. I think Palkia was a really underrated deck. It had, capabilities of beating most things, and it actually was able to spike a lot of tournaments. When people played it, it typically did well, and that's actually a reason as to why I have this water deck over one of the more popular water decks recently, being Chien-Pao. Chien-Pao just barely missed the list. That's a deck that, was probably 11th or 12th on my list, and the reason is that Pia Vstar, when it was played, saw consistent success and still sees consistent success, most recently getting top 4 at the most recent Gdansk Regional Championships, and then also most recently getting top 4 at the San Antonio Regional Championships. Chien-Pao is a deck that saw a ton more play and still sees more play, however, doesn't have the consistent results, which is a reason as to why I chose this water deck above that one when it comes to figuring out exactly what deck was going to be at number 10. I think if more people played this deck would see more results. I think if more people played Palkia, the deck would do quite well, as I think it's, as I said, very underrated, but just not a lot of people have gravitated towards it, but its results are still very successful, and I think that this was quietly one of the stronger decks in the standard format. Obviously, this list has rotated out of the standard format. Things like Scoop Up Net and the Shady Dealings in Inteleon and stuff like that aren't actually in the format anymore, along with just the Drizzile engine in general. However, I still think that this deck's peak was quite high and saw consistent success at the beginning of the year, and I think it deserves its spot at the number 10. All right, let's hop into number 9. Alrighty, hopping into number 9 here, we have Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX paired up with Inteleon VMAX, the deck that has been seeing tons of success recently. This is going to be the list that Cyrus Davis used to win the most recent North American International Championships this previous summer, and this deck is still, at the moment, one of the most powerful decks in the standard format. This deck has seen tons of success. I also won the Barcelona SPE as well. So this deck is really, really good at winning tournaments, has had multiple top cut appearances as well, just in general, and really, I think, deserves its spot on this top 10. I would say the reason as to why this deck is not higher is because it hasn't had the longevity that some of these other decks have had higher up on the list to get placements. Rapid Strike Urshifu Inteleon really was a deck that, started to pick up steam over the summertime. So if there was actually a little bit more data that we had of this deck, maybe this deck would be a little bit higher up. But as of right now, I think number 9 is a fair spot. This deck could pretty much be anything, really was able to focus on taking down those small HP Pokemon, things like the Lost Zone engine, Gardevoir as well. You could wipe their board very, very quickly with things like Medicham into Gmax Rapid Flow. The only matchup that really held this deck back was Lugia Vstar, and actually along with Mew as well. And those are the two decks that this deck struggled with quite a bit But if you're able to dodge those decks, you definitely could have a very, very deep run. This was a deck that was kind of considered a risky play sometimes because it has very polarizing matchups. You will sometimes have those runs where you hit a bunch of easy matchups and you're going to do very, very well. And however, the risk of this deck was you could run into a couple Mews or a couple Lugias, and there's just not really anything that you can do. Some of these other decks have a little bit more balanced matchup spreads, solid game plans versus, most decks in the format maybe just has 50-50s and 45-55s as opposed to 70-30s and, 30-70 matchups that you should never lose. And then you'll go against matchups that you should never win. And I think that's a problem that, Urshifu kind of had, is that there just were some matchups you didn't have control against, regardless of how, how well you drew. And those matchups are two decks that are on this list, which is, I think, is another reason as to why this deck was held back a little bit. But overall, if you hit the right matchups, you could definitely sunrun and see a lot of success, and I think this deck deserves its spot at the number 9 spot. Alrighty, hopping into number 8 here, we have Lost Zone Giratina. Lost Zone Giratina is one of the most powerful Lost Zone decks, and it makes its way onto the top 10 decks of the year. Lost Zone Giratina had 13 regional top 8s along with 3 international top 8s as well. The deck has decent matchups against a lot of things. Most recently, it got second place at the San Antonio Regional Championships. Michael Pramwat as well got top 4 at Worlds with it, and I think that really solidified itself as one of the most powerful decks of this year. It is a little bit more of an inconsistent Lost Zone variant because you don't have things like Forest Seal Stone like the turbo variants of the past had. So this deck was sometimes viewed as a glass cannon deck, but it was consistently solid throughout its tenure in the 2023 formats, just getting lots of top 64s, 32s, top 16s. It just was an incredibly powerful deck. Always was a deck you kind of had to look out for. There really wasn't a time where like, oh, we don't have to worry about Tina. Tina always just was kind of a threat that you had to think about, and its results definitely showed with it spiking at Worlds, getting top 4. Overall, I think this deck is still going to perform quite well until it loses pieces to the Lost Zone engine, which isn't going to be for some time. So I expect that, Giratina is going to continue to perform quite well. One of the things holding it back is its consistency, which I think is a big reason as to why it has struggled to actually win major tournaments, which is why you mostly see it in top 8s and top 4s. You don't actually see it typically going farther than that. Grant Hayes getting incredibly close this previous weekend to winning, but losing to Azul playing Charizard, which is known to be a little bit more of a consistent deck. So anyways, Lost Zone Giratina, very successful deck of the year, and I definitely think it deserves its spot at that number 8. Alrighty, coming in at number 7 here, we have Charizard Pidgeot. Charizard Pidgeot has only been out for a few months, but it has made its mark on the standard format with 14 regional top 8s, including 2 regional wins. Most recently, Azul Garcia Grego getting first place at the San Antonio Regional Championships with this exact 60. Charizard hasn't been out long enough for me to put it a little bit higher. If we got this card earlier in the year, I think that it's probably in the top 5, but we've only had this card since September, so it just hasn't necessarily had the time to, accrue those tournament placements that a lot of these other decks have, which is a reason as to why it's at number 7. But I think that if this deck had more time, it definitely would be higher up, and its placements in just such a short amount of time has definitely shown just how powerful this deck is. You have the Pidgeot engine, which allows you to consistently pick out cards that you need to put together combos, being able to get those rare candies to consistently attack with Charizard EX. A lot of decks get weaker as the game goes on. Charizard is not that type of deck. As it gets stronger, as its attack does more damage for every prize card your opponent has taken. You have comeback potential with things like Iono. Sableye is not necessarily an issue anymore with things like Jirachi. Lost Zone was one of this deck's more difficult matchups, but now with cards like the Jirachi, you're totally okay against that matchup. You hit great type coverage as of right now versus things like MVMax and Gardevoir, both hitting weakness against 2 of the most powerful decks in the format. This deck pretty much has it all right now, and I definitely think it's going to continue to see success, and I wouldn't be surprised if on next year's top 10, this one was a little bit higher because I think it's going to be around for quite some time. It's a great deck. Charizard EX is a really cool Pokemon, and its performances recently really show that it is going to be here to stay. All right, let's move on to number 6. Alrighty, hopping into number 6 here, we have Arceus, Duraludon, Umbreon, just Arceus in general. This is going to be the list that Christian Labella used to get top 8 at the North American International Championships. This deck is just absolutely fantastic. Archus in its lifetime has 77 regional top 8s, including 12 wins, 11 international top 8s, including 3 wins, and it is by far one of the most successful decks that has ever touched the Pokemon TCG. Now, some of those placements were from 2022, as this card has been out for quite some time, but it had an absolutely phenomenal 2023 as well, with Alex Szymanski winning the European International Championships as well with Arceus. This deck has the ability to morph to pretty much whatever you're trying to beat. If you're trying to beat decks like Lugia Vstar, it was able to toss in the Duraludon. If you're trying to beat decks like MVMax and Gardevoir, you had options to put in the Umbreon VMAX as well. You were trying to beat decks like Charizard, you could even play things like Leafeon as well, because Arceus pairs up so nicely with so many different types of Pokemon. It really is the most versatile card in the standard format, and it still is performing decently to this day, with a few day 2 placements at the most recent San Antonio Regional Championships with things like Regigigas. So that just kind of goes to show this deck can literally play any wonky card that people might think is a bad card, and it makes it good. Arceus makes so many mediocre cards good because a lot of these cards have powerful attacks. They're just impossible to power up. Arceus is able to do that with its Trinity Nova. Having Starbirth as well, one of the best effects ever put on a Pokemon card. Just searching your deck for 2 cards is just so ridiculously powerful, and I think Arceus deserves its spot at that number 6. Arceus is truly amazing and has shown itself to be one of the best decks we've ever seen in the Pokemon TCG. Alrighty, hopping into number 5 here, we have Maridon. This is going to be the list that Yuho used to win the Latin American International Championships, and Maridon deserves its respect in the top 5. Maridon accrued 8 regional top 8s, including 1 win. JW Krewalt was able to take down the Toronto Regional Championships, and it also was able to get 2 international top 8s, including the 1 win that Yuho was able to get at the Latin American International Championships this previous month. This deck is absolutely phenomenal. Gaining Iron Hands made it significantly better, being able to fix one of its problem matchups, which were the 1-prize decks. Things like Gardevoir and Lost Zone Toolbox were considered more difficult matchups for this deck. Now with Iron Hands, you have a much better chance of taking those down. This deck has it all. It has speed, consistency, comeback potential, versatility. I think that a lot of people, when Roaring Moon came out, kind of pushed this deck to the side, just thinking Roaring Moon was a better deck. But people kind of began to realize that this deck is just so much more versatile and can do a lot of things that Roaring Moon wants to do, but is, more adapt to countering, like its weaknesses, and people that are tech to beat it. It really has the ability to morph into different, types of strategies. Like if you want to go, super quick with Iron Hands, you can. If you want to slow the game down with the Bravery Charms and just be, two-shotting things, you can. If you want to even use some of your 1-prize attackers, Zapdos is a decent attacker as well, you can. You just have so many different things that you can do with Maridon. It's a lot more versatile of a deck than I think people give it credit for, and I think it definitely deserves its spot at number 5. It's one of the more underrated decks. I think a lot of people kind of disrespected it, saying that it was a no-skill deck that, was just worse than Roaring Moon. But I think as time went on, people began to realize just how special this deck still is and how much more versatility it has than a lot of people give it credit for. So overall, Maridon, absolutely fantastic deck, deserves a spot at that number 5. And I definitely expect it to continue to do well over in the 2024 year. Alrighty, hopping into number 4, we have Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX has been dominating the standard formats for quite some time, and I think it deserves its spot at number 4. This is going to be the list that Tord Reklev used to get 2nd place at the most recent 2023 World Championships, and Gardevoir is here to stay. Still one of the most powerful decks in the format. Now, some people might be wondering, why did you put this deck so low? Well, I think a reason as to why I put it so low is the deck, with all the amount of people playing it, still struggles to win tournaments, which I think is the thing that has held it back for quite some time. It really hasn't been able to consistently capture the spotlight as that number 1 deck in tournaments. It gets tons of top 8s, 2nd places, top 4s, top 16s, incredibly consistent, but very rarely actually wins tournaments, which is kind of strange because of how powerful the deck is. But this deck can do it all. It has the ability to slow down the pace with 1-prizers. It has comeback potential with things like Iono and Reversal Energy. You can try and pressure them with things like turn 2 rare candy as well. If you need to, you have fantastic 1-prizers, fantastic 2-prizers. You have pretty much everything you need, and you're one of the most consistent decks in the format with things like Shining Arcana Gardevoir and also Kirlia, allowing you to burn through your deck as quickly as possible. There's not a whole lot else to say about this deck. It's really, really powerful. It has picked up 16 top 8s, including 3 wins and 8 international top 8s as well. Its results are truly amazing, but I think there's 3 decks that have done just a little bit better than it over the past year. All right. Alrighty, hopping into number 3 here, we have Lost Zone Toolbox. Now, there's about 10 different Lost Zone decks I could have put as this picture. I'm just going to be using Andrew Hedrick's top 16 Toronto list for this, but that goes to show just how powerful Lost Zone is. There are so many different ways to play it, and many of them are tier 1 or tier 2, which just goes to show the versatility of the Comfy engine. Lost Zone in its lifetime has accrued 48 regional top 8s, including 8 wins. 8 wins is absolutely crazy. 7 international top 8s, including 1 win. Most recently, Azul Garcia Grigo won the Oceania International Championships, taking down Reagan Retzlav's Lugia deck, which solidified its first international win. Lost Box can do it all. It's consistently one of the most played decks. Even when Jirachi came out, the deck is still seeing play. People are now using it with things like Roaring Moon. The deck just has incredible versatility and can truly be played with anything. This is going to be the Turbo list that I'm just showing because Turbo was the variant that a lot of people used. But earlier in the year when Scoop Up Net was still legal, people were playing, you know, things like the Rayquaza. People were playing heavy Scoop Up Nets as well, you know, trying to hit that, you know, turn 1 hit and stuff like that, which was a lot easier back then because you had Scoop Up Net. But this is going to be on the list that we're going to show off. Overall, Lost Zone Box, incredibly powerful. One of the decks that was able to consistently get those tournament wins, unlike Gardevoir, which I think is a reason as to why this deck deserves its spot just a little bit above Gardevoir. All right, let's move on to number 2. Alrighty, hopping into number 2 here, we have Mew VMAX. Now, you can also include DTE Mew as well, as this is going to be the Fusion Mew variant that Vance Kelly used to win the most recent World Championships. Mew VMAX in its lifetime has 66 regional top 8s, including 7 wins, 7 international top 8s, including an international win as well. Vance Kelly winning Worlds, obviously. This deck has been around for quite some time, since 2022, so a lot of those placements are from the 2022 year, but in 2023 it still was kicking it, being one of the most powerful decks in the standard format. Still is considered to this day a tier 1 to tier 1.5 deck, and it can pretty much beat anything in the standard format. Both Fusion Mew and DT Mew have been patrolling the top tables recently, getting tons of top placements. We most recently saw at San Antonio Regionals, plenty of them getting top 16, top 32, and just in day 2 in general, the presence of Mew VMAX was still there. Even with decks like Charizard seeing lots of success, Mew is still performing incredibly high. I got to put this deck at number 2 just because it most recently won Worlds. Worlds is the crown jewel of the year for Pokemon tournaments. It is the biggest tournament of the year. So although if Worlds did not exist or Mew did not win Worlds, maybe it would have been at 3, 4, or 5. But with its win at Worlds, we got to put it at 2, as that's the biggest tournament of the year, and it was able to shine the most there, with Vance Kelly getting first place. Anyways, Mew's amazing. It's going to stay amazing until it rotates. It's just an incredible card. Let's move on to number 1. Alrighty, coming in at number 1 here, we have Lugia Archeops. Now, this is going to be the Lugia Archeops paired up with Aurora Energy build that saw tons of success in the previous format before it rotated out at the beginning of the 2023 year. So this version only had a few months of 2023 to see success, but its peak was just so unfathomably high. Pretty much just felt like it was going to win every tournament. I had to put it at number 1. We'll also include things like Lugia Single Strike and Lugia Colorless as well. Just kind of Lugia Vstar as an archetype, I think, was the most successful variant of 2023. It picked up 60 regional top 8s, including 8 wins, 13 international top 8s as well, including 1 win. That 1 win was part of the 2022-2023 season, with Tord Reklev winning the Latin American International Championships back in November of 2022. But regardless of that, it still had an absolutely incredible 2023 season. It felt like Lugia always had a chance to see success, and specifically with this variant, this deck just was the biggest threat. People were playing, you know, tier 2, tier 3 decks that didn't really beat much else, but only beat Lugia just because of how prevalent Lugia was. Lugia just completely warped the format, and Lugia V-Star's peak, although this variant has not seen as, you know, is not like seen play anymore because it's rotated out, its peak was just so unfathomably high. I think I have to put it at number 1. Anyways, with that being said, that is going to be my list. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Let me know if you agree. Let me know if I missed a deck. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you're looking for any of these cards, make sure to go check out GameGridSLC.com. Link will be in the description. You can use my code SMARTTCG for 5% off on your next order. But with that being said, thank you so much for all the support as always. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little bit raspy, that is why. But anyways, we're going to be trying to get back to daily content soon, so I'm excited to do that. But anyways, with that being said, thank you so much for all the support as always. This is SmartTCG, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out. If you're looking to improve your game, I do offer coaching on MetaFi. I was ranked in the top 16 ranked players in the world last season, and I know what it takes to improve your game. My students want to combine 3 regionals last year, and I know what it takes to reach that next level. I do offer a free coaching consultation so you can get an idea whether or not coaching works for you. And along with that, I also have a singular sessions, training packages, and more. If you're looking to find out more information, feel free to book that free consultation, or also don't hesitate to shoot me a message on Discord. My Discord will be in the description. All right. Thanks for sitting around and listening to this. I appreciate it. This is SmartTCG. I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out.